My brother's new bride swapped his antipsychotics for sugar pills, cut him off from our family, and painted me as a jealous stalker online when I called her out, so we made sure she got publicly exposed at their vow renewal. She did not take this well. My brother's wedding was magical. His wife Lauren looked like a real-life Disney princess, and I could literally see my brother tearing up as she walked down the aisle. I never would have imagined what was really going on behind closed doors. I suggested we all go out for drinks to continue celebrating after the reception, but Jake seemed hesitant. He mentioned that Lauren thought it would be better if they headed straight to their honeymoon suite. I understood, and he promised we'd reconnect after Cabo. The changes started almost right away. Jake had gone from spamming the family group chat with updates and photos to never texting anyone back. My mom called me one night, begging me to check up on him. At the time, I thought she was being dramatic, but I was the closest one to him, so I did it anyway. I expected him to answer and laugh about mom being stressed out for no reason, but I never saw him, because Lauren was the one who answered. "Jake is resting," was all she said, before slamming the door right in my face. As per my mom's request, I kept trying, but they all went the same way. Lauren would give a new excuse every time, and soon, I found myself worrying even more than my mom, because I was your atypical overworked social worker, who never really turned off the work side of my brain. So I did what any rational adult would do in that situation. I knew he finished work early on Wednesdays, so I waited outside until 2 p.m. hit and followed him all the way to Whole Foods. I was immediately struck by how drained and disoriented he appeared. He didn't even question why I was visiting a store 15 miles away from my home. I straight up asked him why he looked so pale, and he mentioned his medication seemed less effective lately. I breathed a sigh of relief because that meant the solution was simple. "Well, in that case, you should consult your psychiatrist." "No," he immediately interrupted. "Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my voice. It's just that Lauren has everything under control." I just nodded because it was clear he wasn't going to tell me the truth. So that weekend, I showed up to their home with mom's homemade lasagna, which was really just a frozen meal from Target. Lauren informed me that Jake was at an emergency therapy session at some faraway clinic, so I stared right into her cold eyes and put on the happiest fake voice I could muster. "Oh, I know where that is. I'll go pick him up." I wanted her to know that I didn't trust her, and I guess she took the hint, because suddenly she snapped and said he had already booked an Uber home. And the next day, I got the phone call. It was Jake. I could hear the sound of water splashing in the background like he was in a bathtub. "I feel like I'm losing my mind." Beep. The phone line had been cut off. I was so freaked out that I immediately told my mom about it, and we were both spam calling the house. But every time, Lauren would be the one to answer. And on the 9th time I called, she screamed, "I told you he needs rest," before blocking both our numbers. I couldn't sleep at all that night, and when I woke up, I got yet another call. But this time it wasn't Lauren. It was my Uncle Harvey. He told me that Jake had told him to tell me to stop being a jealous beach. But when I asked Harvey what he thought, he told me he was just as worried as me. We were going to damn near force our way into that man's house until we realized that it's best to give up, because later that month we all received invitations in the mail. Him and Lauren were redoing their wedding vows. I was extremely confused, but the last thing I wanted was for Lauren to revoke my invite, so I just texted her saying that I couldn't wait to attend. And when the day came, Jake looked nothing like he did that day in Whole Foods. He had the usual boyish smile plastered on his face and made his usual cocky jokes. Then came the vows. We all surrounded them while they stood at the top of the room, and Lauren looked as confident as ever. Jake went first, but instead of saying anything, he took out a med bottle from his pocket. Lauren gasped. "So I'm sure you've all been wondering why I've been acting so strange recently. And trust me, for a while I was too. But then I realized." He then stopped talking, like he was deep in thought. "Oh, honey, do you want to tell them, or should I?" he asked, staring straight at Lauren. "Okay, fine, I'll tell them. Lauren here has been replacing all my medication with placebos, so my entire life has been haunted by my schizophrenic psychosis spells every single day." The entire room went so quiet you could hear a pin drop, and in a moment of quick thinking, Lauren walked right up to me and slapped me in the face. "I know you put him up to this, you barren beach." My brother pulled her off of me, and my Uncle Harvey was a police officer, so she ended up being charged with 3 years in prison, and my brother was finally set free from her evil little gremlin hands. But what I didn't anticipate was the jails being overcrowded, and her being let out on good behavior after just 2 weeks in a cell, because for the entirety of her stay, there was just one thing on her mind: getting revenge on me. The first sign came 3 days after her release. My cousin Alexandra called me, which was weird because we hadn't talked in months. "Hey, I just wanted to check if you're okay," she said, her voice careful and measured. "I saw your posts on Facebook, and I'm worried about you." I hadn't posted anything on Facebook in weeks. My stomach dropped as I logged in and saw it. Lauren had created fake screenshots of messages supposedly from me, ranting about how Jake was ungrateful and how I'd saved him from that witch. The posts made me look unhinged, obsessive. She'd even photoshopped timestamps to make it seem like I'd been harassing her throughout her jail time. I tried to explain to Alexandra that they were fake, but she just said she hoped I'd get help and hung up. Within hours, I was getting messages from extended family members. Some were concerned, others angry. My Aunt McCatherine sent me a long text about how I needed to let Jake live his own life. By evening, 3 cousins had blocked me entirely. The next morning, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside were dozens of empty med bottles, each one labeled with my name in Lauren's handwriting. At the bottom was a note: "Thought you might need these for your issues. L." My hands shook as I threw them in the trash. This was just the beginning, and I knew it. Jake was staying with Uncle Harvey now, trying to get back on track with his proper medication. I called Harvey to warn him about what Lauren was doing, but he already knew. She'd been calling their mom, crying about how I'd destroyed her marriage with my jealousy and lies. "Your mother actually asked me if maybe you should talk to someone," Harvey said, his voice heavy. "Lauren's got her convinced that you've been obsessed with breaking them up since the wedding." I couldn't believe it. My own mother was buying into Lauren's manipulation. When I called her to explain, she sighed deeply. "Honey, I just think everyone needs some space right now. Maybe you should focus on your own life for a while instead of getting so involved in Jake's." face. The betrayal stung worse than Alexandra's call. Lauren was systematically turning my family against me, and she was doing it brilliantly. Over the next week, things escalated. I started noticing small things missing from my apartment. First, it was a photo of Jake and me from when we were kids, the one I kept on my bookshelf. Then my spare keys vanished from the kitchen drawer. When my anxiety medication disappeared from my bathroom cabinet, I knew I had to check the security footage from my building. There she was, clear as day. Lauren, using a key to enter my apartment while I was at work. She moved through my space like she owned it, taking specific items. The building manager said it wasn't enough for police action since she had a key, which she must have copied when Jake still lived with her, and I'd given him my spare. I changed my locks immediately, but the damage was done. She'd been in my home, touched my things, stolen my memories. Then came the Instagram incident. I was at work, dealing with a particularly difficult case, when my supervisor Benjamin called me into his office. His face was grim. "We need to talk about your social media presence," he said, sliding his phone across the desk. Someone had created a fake Instagram account using my photos and name, just slightly different enough to seem real. The account had been sending disturbing messages to everyone in my contact list, including coworkers and Jake's boss. The messages talked about self-harm, made violent threats, and included bizarre rants about medication and mind control. "This isn't me," I said, my voice cracking. "Benjamin, you know me. This is Lauren. She's trying to destroy my life." He looked skeptical but agreed to investigate. HR got involved. I had to provide proof that I didn't own the account, submit to a social media audit, and watch as my professional reputation crumbled. Even after proving the account was fake, the damage lingered. Coworkers looked at me differently. Whispers followed me down hallways. Jake was struggling too. He called me one night, his voice shaky. "I keep getting these letters," he said. "No return address. They're about things that happened when I was sick. Things I don't remember, but they're so detailed, so specific. What if I really did these things and just blocked them out?" Lauren was gaslighting him through the mail, making him question his own reality again. The cruelty of it made me sick. He'd just gotten stable on his medication, and she was trying to destabilize him all over again. "Jake, she's lying. You know she's lying. This is what she does." But I could hear the doubt in his voice when he said goodbye. The next blow came through CPS. I sometimes babysat for my neighbor's daughter, little Benji, just to help out when they were in a bind. So when 2 social workers showed up at my door with questions about child endangerment, I nearly collapsed. Someone had called in an anonymous tip claiming I'd been giving Benji unauthorized medication, leaving her alone for hours, and showing signs of mental instability. The investigation was thorough and humiliating. They interviewed my neighbors, my employer, even little Benji herself. Of course they found nothing, but my neighbor couldn't risk it. She tearfully told me she couldn't let me babysit anymore. Another relationship destroyed, another part of my life Lauren had poisoned. I was at my breaking point when I called Jake and Harvey for help. We needed to fight back, but legally, carefully. Jake had an idea. "She still calls me sometimes," he said, leaves voicemails. "What if I call her back and record it?" It was risky, but we were desperate. Jake called her the next day, putting on his best vulnerable act. I sat next to him, holding my breath as he talked. "I've been thinking about what you said in your letters," he told her. "About the things I did. I need to know more. My memory is so fuzzy." Lauren took the bait. She started describing elaborate scenarios that never happened, mixing in just enough truth to seem credible. Then she slipped. "Remember when you told me about your sister's termination of pregnancy?" she said. "How she made you drive her there because she was too embarrassed to tell anyone else?" I'd never had a termination of pregnancy, and the only people who knew about my miscarriage 3 years ago were Jake and my doctor. It was medical information she could only have gotten by going through my private records or Jake's phone when he was sick. Jake kept her talking, getting her to reveal more things she shouldn't have known. Private medical information, confidential details about my work cases, even my social security number. She'd been planning this for a while. When we played the recording for Harvey, he immediately recognized the legal implications. This was evidence of stalking, harassment, and identity theft. But Lauren must have sensed we were onto her, because she struck back hard. 2 days later, I was back at work when Benjamin called me in again. This time, he looked furious. "CPS called," he said. "Again. This time about allegations that you've been using your position to access confidential information about a former client named Lauren. She'd weaponized the system I worked in against me. The investigation would take weeks, during which I'd be suspended without pay. Even though I knew I'd be cleared, the financial strain would be devastating." That night, Harvey called a family meeting. He'd had enough. Using his connections in the community, not his police authority, he gathered everyone at his house. Mom, our aunts and uncles, cousins, even some family friends. Lauren somehow got wind of it and showed up with a folder full of evidence. "I just want you all to see who she really is," Lauren announced, pulling out printed screenshots and photos. But Jake stood up, his hands steady for the first time in months. "No," he said simply. "You're done lying to my family." He played the recording for everyone. The room went silent as they heard Lauren casually discussing private medical information, making up elaborate lies, and revealing how she'd been systematically destroying my life. Family members who'd blocked me started pulling out their phones, checking the dates on the messages they'd received, the fake posts, the manipulated screenshots. It all started to unravel. Lauren tried one more time. She pulled Jake aside, and I heard her hiss. "If you don't support me right now, I'll tell everyone you've relapsed. I'll say you're off your meds again. Who do you think they'll believe?" But Jake was ready. He'd been recording on his phone the whole time. He sent the video straight to the family group chat, the one I'd been removed from weeks earlier. The effect was immediate. Our Aunt McCatherine, who'd been Lauren's biggest supporter, stood up and told her to leave. Our cousin McCatherine, who'd blocked me on everything, came over and hugged me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "We should have known." Lauren looked around the room, realizing she'd lost. Her carefully constructed web of lies had collapsed. She grabbed her folder and stormed out, but not before shooting me one last venomous look. The restraining order was approved within a week. Jake filed it with Harvey's help, and it included provisions against contacting any family members or accessing our social media. My job was reinstated after the investigation cleared me, and Benjamin personally apologized for doubting me. Slowly, my life life pieced itself back together. The family group chat pinged with a new message, Jake adding me back. The cousins who'd blocked me reached out with apologies. My neighbor even asked if I'd consider babysitting Benji again once everything calmed down. But the best part was seeing Jake heal. With Lauren truly gone and unable to contact him, he flourished. His medication worked properly, his smile returned, and he even started dating a nice woman named Jamie from his support group. As for Lauren, the last I heard, she'd moved 3 states away. No family to manipulate, no support system to exploit. She'd isolated herself completely in her quest to isolate me. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom or a jail cell. Sometimes it comes from the truth finally being heard, from family choosing to stand together, and from a manipulator losing the only power they ever had, the power to deceive. I kept one of those med bottles she sent me, not as a trophy or a reminder of what she put me through, but as a reminder of what I survived, what we all survived, and how sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living your life, surrounded by people who love you, free from the poison of someone else's hatred. Jake and I are closer than ever now. We have dinner every Sunday, and he tells me about his week, his therapy progress, his new relationship. We don't talk about Lauren anymore. There's nothing left to say. She's just a chapter in our story, one that's finally, definitively closed. I should have known that definitively closed was wishful thinking. Lauren wasn't the type to accept defeat, and 3 states away wasn't nearly far enough. The first sign that our nightmare wasn't over came 6 months later. Jake had been doing so well. His medication perfectly balanced, his relationship with Jamie blossoming, his old spark returning. We'd just finished our usual Sunday dinner when his phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. "That's weird," he said, frowning at the screen. "Someone viewed my profile 17 times today." The account had no photo, just a generic silhouette. The name was L. Anderson, close enough to Lauren's maiden name to make my skin crawl, but different enough to avoid violating the restraining order. When Jake clicked on it, the profile was bare except for one detail. The location showed she was back in our state. Over the next few days, Jake started getting connection requests from various professionals in his field. They all had something in common. In their messages, they mentioned hearing concerning things about his work performance and mental health struggles. When Jake reached out to his boss, he discovered someone had been calling his workplace, claiming to be a concerned family member worried about his stability. His boss, thankfully, knew Jake well enough to dismiss it, but the seed of doubt had been planted with his coworkers. I watched my brother's confidence wobble for the first time in months. Then my problem started. I'd been promoted at work, finally feeling like my career was back on track. But one morning, Benjamin called me in with a strange expression. "We've been getting calls," he said carefully. "Someone claiming to be your therapist, saying you've been missing appointments, and they're concerned about your ability to handle your caseload." I didn't have a therapist. When we traced the calls, they came from various burner phones, impossible to track. But the damage was spreading. My coworkers started treating me like fragile glass, constantly asking if I was okay and offering to take over my cases. Mom was the next target. She started receiving packages at her house: baby clothes, pregnancy tests, pamphlets about supporting adult children through fertility struggles. Each package came with a note: "For when your daughter finally gives you grandchildren." The cruel reminder of Lauren's barren comment was clear. Mom tried to hide them from me, but I saw the worry in her eyes. The escalation was subtle but relentless. Jake's car tires were slashed while he was at a therapy appointment. No cameras in that particular lot, of course. My professional Facebook page was flooded with 1-star reviews from fake accounts, all claiming I'd been unprofessional and unstable. Harvey found a tracker on his car during a routine check, though we couldn't prove who placed it. But Lauren was too smart to leave direct evidence. Every incident was just ambiguous enough, just removed enough from her to avoid legal consequences. The restraining order was useless against someone who'd learned to weaponize distance. The breaking point came when Jamie called me in tears. She'd been getting anonymous messages about Jake's past, twisted versions of his mental health struggles that painted him as dangerous and unstable. Photos from his worst moments, taken when Lauren was supposedly caring for him, showing him disheveled and confused. "I know it's not true," Jamie sobbed, "but seeing those images, knowing someone out there has been documenting his vulnerable moments, it's terrifying." Jake was devastated. He'd been so careful about opening up to Jamie, so proud of his honesty about his condition. Now Lauren was using that honesty as a weapon. That's when I decided to stop playing defense. I called Alexandra first. Despite our rocky patch during Lauren's initial campaign, she'd apologized sincerely, and we'd rebuilt our relationship. She worked in tech and had connections I needed. "I want to fight back," I told her, "but I need to be smarter than her." Alexandra introduced me to her friend Marcus, a cybersecurity expert who specialized in documenting digital harassment. Within days, he'd helped us set up a comprehensive tracking system. Every fake review, every burner phone call, every suspicious profile, we documented everything. Meanwhile, Harvey used his community connections differently. He reached out to other law enforcement contacts in the 3 states where Lauren had supposedly moved. Turns out, she'd left a trail of similar behavior. Former roommates with mysteriously ruined reputations, ex-boyfriends whose new relationships had been sabotaged by anonymous tips. We were building a pattern, but we needed more. Jake came up with the next move. He created a fake LinkedIn profile of his own, portraying himself as a mental health advocate looking to connect with others who'd been affected by medication tampering. It was specific enough to catch Lauren's attention, but vague enough to seem legitimate. Within a week, he got a message. The account was anonymous, but the writing style was unmistakably Lauren's. She expressed sympathy for his journey and subtly probed for information about his current treatment. Jake played along, carefully feeding her false information about switching medications and struggling with side effects. Sure enough, the anonymous letters to his workplace intensified, now including specific details about medication changes that had never happened. We had her pattern documented. She couldn't resist using any information she thought she had, but Lauren was getting bolder. One night, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but everything was slightly wrong. Pictures turned at odd angles, books rearranged, my medication bottles lined up on the kitchen counter in a perfect row. She wanted me to know she'd been there. The security footage showed a woman in a maintenance uniform, face obscured by a baseball cap. The building manager didn't recognize her, but somehow she'd gotten a key. When we checked with the locksmith, they had a work order in my name requesting a duplicate for a family emergency. The signature was close enough to mine to pass casual inspection. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. The violation of my space, the knowledge that she could get to me whenever she wanted. It was exactly what she intended. I was jumping at shadows, double-checking locks, seeing her face in every crowd. Mom finally broke down during our weekly call. The packages had escalated to funeral planning documents, books about coping with the loss of adult children, sympathy cards for future losses. She was terrified something would happen to Jake or me. "I can't lose you," she sobbed. "Either of you. Why won't she just leave us alone?" That's when Uncle Harvey made a decision that changed everything. He couldn't use his official position, but he had vacation days saved up. He took 2 weeks off and dedicated himself to our case. "I'm done watching my family suffer," he said. "Let's end this." Harvey's investigation revealed something we hadn't expected. Lauren wasn't working alone anymore. She'd connected with an online community of people who'd been wronged by family members, a toxic echo chamber that validated and encouraged escalating harassment campaigns. They shared tactics, resources, even alibis. One member of this group, we discovered, worked for a phone company and had been helping Lauren access our call records. Another was a locksmith who'd processed that fake work order. She'd built a network of enablers who believed her victim narrative, but every network has weak links. Alexandra and Marcus identified one, a woman named Sarah who'd been part of the group but left after realizing she was being manipulated. With careful approach, I reached out to her. Sarah's story was heartbreaking. She'd joined after a messy divorce, seeking support, but the group had twisted her pain into something darker, encouraging her to stalk and harass her ex-husband's new wife. When she finally recognized what she'd become, she'd cut all ties. "Lauren was one of the worst," Sarah told me over coffee, her hands shaking. "She had this way of making you feel like your anger was justified, like anything you did was self-defense. She'd share these elaborate stories about how you'd destroyed her life, how Jake was being controlled by you. She made herself sound so convincing." Sarah agreed to help us. She still had access to some of the group's communication channels, though she'd been too scared to report them before. With her cooperation, we started documenting everything: the coordination of harassment campaigns, the sharing of personal information, the escalation tactics they promoted. But Lauren must have sensed the walls closing in. The harassment suddenly stopped. For 2 weeks, nothing. No calls, no packages, no fake profiles. The silence was almost worse than the chaos. Jake was the first to notice something was off. Jamie had been distant, canceling dates and avoiding his calls. When he finally confronted her, she broke down. "I got a visit," she whispered, "from a woman claiming to be a social worker. She said she was investigating concerns about your mental state, that I might be in danger. She knew things, private things I'd only told you." My blood ran cold. Lauren was impersonating a social worker now, using my profession against us. Jamie hadn't believed her, but the seed of fear had been planted. She needed space to process, she said. Jake understood, but I saw the light dim in his eyes again. The next day, I got a call from Benjamin. There had been a complaint filed with the state licensing board. Someone claiming to be a former client accused me of boundary violations, of using my position to access their personal information for a family vendetta. The complainant's name? L. Anderson. The investigation would be thorough. Even though I knew I'd be cleared, it meant more scrutiny, more questions, more damage to my professional reputation. Lauren had found a way to use the system I'd dedicated my life to as a weapon against me, but she'd made a mistake. In filing the official complaint, she'd had to provide contact information. It was a P.O. box in a town 2 hours away, but it was something. Harvey and I decided to stake it out, taking turns watching from a coffee shop across the street. On the third day, we saw her. She was thinner, her hair dyed black, but it was definitely Lauren. She walked with the confidence of someone who thought she was untouchable, who believed her web of lies and distance protected her. We didn't confront her. Instead, we followed at a distance, documenting everything. She led us to a small apartment complex where she'd been living under an assumed name. The mailbox showed L. Anderson, but the lease, we later discovered, was under a completely different alias. That night, we had another family meeting. This time, it wasn't about defending ourselves. It was about going on the offensive. We had evidence of identity fraud, impersonation of a social worker, interstate stalking, and coordination of harassment. Harvey's law enforcement contacts in that jurisdiction were very interested in our documentation, but before we could act, Lauren made her biggest move yet. I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. Someone had posted on Reddit, on multiple mental health and family support subreddits, claiming to be me. The posts detailed how I'd been obsessed with my brother, how I'd sabotaged his marriage out of jealousy, how I was now stalking his poor ex-wife who was just trying to rebuild her life. The posts were incredibly detailed, mixing enough truth with lies to seem credible. They mentioned my job, my brother's condition, even included photos of Jake and me that had been stolen from my apartment. Thousands of people were reading, commenting, judging. Some offered support to the victim, Lauren. Others called for me to get help. A few even suggested I should be reported to my employer. My professional reputation, my personal life, my relationship with my brother, it was all laid bare and twisted for the entertainment of strangers. The posts went viral in those communities, shared as a cautionary tale of family obsession and enabling. But Lauren had finally overplayed her hand. In her eagerness to destroy me publicly, she'd included too many specific details. Marcus was able to trace the IP addresses, the writing style, the photos that could only have come from my apartment. We had her digital fingerprints all over it. More importantly, Sarah recognized the pattern. This was a tactic the harassment group used frequently: public humiliation through false narratives. She provided us with screenshots of Lauren bragging in their private channels about her Reddit bomb, complete with admissions of creating the fake posts. The evidence was overwhelming. Harvey's contacts moved quickly. Within 48 hours, Lauren was arrested at her apartment. The charges were extensive: cyberstalking, identity theft, impersonation of a social worker, breaking and entering, violation violation of a restraining order through third-party contact, and conspiracy to commit harassment. But even as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Lauren smiled. She looked directly at the officer's body camera and said, "I'm just a victim trying to protect myself from a family that destroyed my life. Everything I did was in self-defense." She was still playing the victim, still convinced her narrative would save her. But this time, the evidence was too strong. The other members of her harassment group scattered, deleting accounts and destroying evidence. But we had enough. Several faced their own charges, their network of enablers finally exposed. The legal process would be long, but for the first time in over a year, I could breathe. Jake and Jamie reconciled, stronger for having weathered the storm together. Mom stopped jumping every time the doorbell rang. I returned to work with my head held high, my colleagues now fully aware of what I'd been facing. But the Reddit posts remained, archived somewhere in the depths of the internet. Sometimes I wonder if people still stumble across them, believing the lies, judging me based on Lauren's fiction. It's a reminder that some damage can't be undone, some lies can't be completely erased. The trial date was set for 3 months out. Lauren's lawyer tried every trick in the book to get the charges reduced, but the evidence was too damning. The screenshots from Sarah, the recorded calls, the security footage, the fake social media accounts, it all painted a clear picture of systematic harassment. During those 3 months, something unexpected happened. Other victims started coming forward. A woman named Melissa reached out after seeing a local news story about the arrest. Lauren had dated her brother 5 years ago and pulled similar stunts when he tried to break up with her. Then there was Connor, whose ex-girlfriend had mysteriously started receiving anonymous threats after she began dating him. The pattern was always the same. Lauren would befriend the wronged party online, validate their anger, then orchestrate harassment campaigns. Jake threw himself into helping build the case. He organized all the evidence chronologically, created detailed timelines, and even testified in front of the grand jury. Watching him take control like that, seeing him channel his experience into something productive, made me prouder than I could express. The trial itself was surreal. Lauren showed up looking like a completely different person. Conservative clothes, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a demure bun. She'd clearly been coached to appear sympathetic, but when she took the stand, her true nature slipped through. The prosecutor asked her about the med bottles she'd sent me. Lauren's response was chilling in its casualness. She claimed they were meant as a joke between family members, and that I was being overly sensitive. When asked about breaking into my apartment, she insisted she still had rightful access as family. The jury wasn't buying it. The most damaging testimony came from Sarah. She detailed how the harassment group operated, how Lauren had bragged about her tactics, how she'd encouraged others to escalate their campaigns. Sarah brought receipts, actual screenshots of Lauren teaching others how to create fake social media accounts, how to avoid detection, how to psychologically torment their targets. Lauren's defense tried to paint her as a victim of domestic abuse who was simply defending herself. They brought up Jake's mental health struggles, trying to suggest he'd been violent or threatening. But Jake's medical records told a different story. His only episodes of confusion or distress coincided perfectly with when Lauren had been tampering with his medication. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Lauren's face when the judge read it was something I'll never forget. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely shocked. I think she'd actually convinced herself that her victim narrative would save her. The sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. During that time, Lauren was held without bail after the prosecutor successfully argued she was a flight risk. We finally had peace, real peace, for the first time in what felt like forever. Jake and Jamie got back together properly. Without the constant threat of Lauren's interference, they could actually build something real. Jamie told me later that seeing Jake stand up to Lauren, seeing him fight back with such determination, had actually strengthened her feelings for him. She saw the man he really was, not the victim Lauren had tried to paint him as. Mom started sleeping through the night again. She even joked about the baby clothes Lauren had sent, saying she'd donated them to a women's shelter. At least something good came from her crazy, she said, and we actually laughed about it. The sentencing day arrived. The judge had received letters from all of Lauren's victims, detailing the impact of her harassment. I wrote about the professional damage, the sleepless nights, the constant fear. Jake wrote about the medical tampering, the gaslighting, the theft of his agency. Even Jamie submitted a letter about the psychological toll of receiving those photos and messages. Lauren's mother showed up to plead for leniency. It was the first time we'd seen her since the wedding. She looked defeated, aged by her daughter's actions. She tried to explain that Lauren had always been sensitive and misunderstood. But when the prosecutor presented the full scope of Lauren's crimes, even her mother couldn't maintain the facade. The judge sentenced Lauren to 5 years in federal prison, with 3 years of supervised probation after release. She'd also have to pay restitution to all her victims, and would be permanently barred from using social media or contacting any of us. The cyberstalking charges alone carried serious weight, and the identity theft pushed it into federal territory. As they led Lauren away, she turned to look at us one last time. I expected to see hatred or defiance, but instead, she just looked empty. The elaborate fantasy she'd built, where she was the perpetual victim and we were the villains, had finally collapsed completely. The first few months after the trial were strange. I kept waiting for something to happen. A mysterious package, a fake social media account, a threatening message, but nothing came. The silence was actually peaceful this time, not ominous. Jake's recovery accelerated dramatically. His psychiatrist said the stability and lack of stress had allowed his medication to work optimally. He got promoted at work, moved into a nicer apartment, and even started volunteering with a mental health advocacy group. He wanted to help others who'd been victims of medication tampering. I got my full reputation back at work. Benjamin actually put me up for a leadership position, saying my handling of the situation showed incredible resilience and judgment. My coworkers, who'd once whispered about me in hallways, now came to me for advice on dealing with difficult situations. The Reddit posts about me were still out there, but something interesting happened. Other users who'd been following the trial started commenting with updates, linking to news articles about Lauren's conviction. The narrative shifted. Instead of being seen as an obsessed sister, I became someone who'd fought back against a sophisticated harassment campaign 9 and 1. About a year after the sentencing, I got a letter from Sarah. She'd started a support group for people who'd been caught up in toxic online communities. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to speak to them about recognizing manipulation tactics and protecting themselves from escalating situations. I agreed immediately. The speaking engagement was more emotional than I expected. The room was full of people who'd been where Sarah had been, manipulated into becoming weapons for someone else's vendetta. Some had lost relationships, jobs, even their freedom, but they were all trying to make amends and build better lives. One woman approached me afterward with tears in her eyes. She'd been part of Lauren's group and had helped with some of the fake reviews on my professional page. She apologized profusely and asked if there was anything she could do to make it right. I told her the best thing she could do was share her story, help others avoid the same trap. Jake proposed to Jamie on the second anniversary of Lauren's sentencing. He did it at a family dinner, with all of us there. He said he wanted the people who'd fought for him to witness the happiness they'd helped him achieve. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The wedding was small but perfect. Jake had asked me to be his best person, and I stood beside him as Jamie walked down the aisle. She looked radiant, but more importantly, she looked at Jake with complete trust and love. No shadows of doubt, no fear of what might come, just pure happiness. During the reception, Mom pulled me aside. She apologized for the 100th time about doubting me when Lauren first started her campaign. I told her what I always told her. Lauren was a master manipulator, and nobody could have seen it coming. But this time, Mom said something that stuck with me. "You saved him," she said simply. "You saved my son." I thought about that a lot in the months that followed. Had I saved Jake? Or had he saved himself by finding the courage to expose Lauren at the vow renewal? Maybe we'd saved each other. Maybe that's what family really means. Being willing to fight for each other even when the world thinks you're crazy. The last update I got about Lauren came from Harvey. She'd been transferred to a minimum security facility after 2 years of good behavior. She'd enrolled in therapy programs and was reportedly making progress. Part of me hoped it was true, that she was actually getting help, but a bigger part of me was just grateful she was still far away from us. Jake and Jamie had their first child a year after the wedding. They named her Hope, which felt fitting. When they asked me to be her godmother, I ugly cried for a solid 10 minutes. Holding that tiny baby, knowing she'd grow up in a safe, stable home with parents who truly loved each other, it felt like the ultimate victory over everything Lauren had tried to destroy. The med bottles Lauren had sent me, I'd kept one, like I mentioned before. But after Hope was born, I finally threw it away. I didn't need the reminder anymore. The scars from that time would always be there, but they no longer defined me. Life moved on. I got promoted to director at my agency. Jake became a respected advocate in the mental health community. Jamie started a successful photography business. Mom became the world's most devoted grandmother. Harvey retired and spent his time fishing and telling stories about his most interesting cases. Ours always featured prominently. Sometimes I run into people who remember the Reddit posts, who ask if I'm that sister from the viral story. I tell them yes, and then I tell them the real story. Most are shocked by how different the truth is from what they'd read. It's a good reminder about believing everything you see online, but the best moments are the quiet ones. Sunday dinners where we laugh about normal things. Watching Hope take her first steps. Jake and Jamie's gentle teasing of each other. Mom's terrible jokes. Harvey's fishing stories that get more elaborate each time. These are the moments Lauren tried to steal from us, and these are the moments that prove she failed. We don't talk about her anymore. Not because we're avoiding the subject, but because there's simply nothing left to say. She's serving her time, we're living our lives, and that chapter is truly closed. No wishful thinking this time, just reality. And the reality is pretty damn good.